Hello and welcome to another TLDR EU video. In one of the longest summits in European history, negotiations surrounding a COVID recovery plan have been fraught, with negotiations continuing through the night and way past the timetabled schedule, with at one point the negotiations on the brink of a spectacular collapse. And even when this script's first draft was written, whether or not a deal would even be on the cards was far from a given. Only at 5:30 AM Brussels time on the fifth day of negotiations was a deal finally concluded. So in this video, we're going to take a look at what was negotiated and agreed, what the flare points quickly became, and how the negotiations came close to the brink of a spectacular collapse. We just reached 50,000 subscribers on TLDR EU, so thank you all so much for your support. But we know that a whole bunch of you haven't clicked the button just yet, so if you're waiting, then please lend us a hand. Also, as a thank you, you can get 10% off any item in the TLDR store using code EU50000. So pick up your badges, stickers, and books in the store now. Thank you so much for your support. Discussion surrounding a post-COVID recovery package is nothing new. Back in May, we covered the Franco-German proposal of 500 billion euros, all of which was set to be in the form of grants. The problem with this plan was the pushback they received from the Frugal Four of the Netherlands, Austria, Denmark and Sweden, who tempered against a solely grants-based proposal, and who pushed for a loans for loans proposal. The European Commission under Ursula von der Leyen ultimately blended the two proposals into one, a 1.85 trillion euro package consisting of a specific 750 billion euro recovery fund, 500 billion euros of which will be given as grants. Whatever proposal would become reality, ultimately it all came down to the approval of the European Council, which had been meeting via video conferences without consensus and agreement. In an attempt to give a new impetus to achieving an agreement, an in-person two-day summit was arranged. A two-day summit which quickly ended up being one of the longest summits in the bloc's history, on par with the discussions at the height of the Eurozone crisis, and a matter of minutes from passing the 2000 Nice summit. But what was eventually agreed? Well, all in all, 750 billion euros is to be jointly borrowed to form a recovery fund, dubbed Next Generation EU, of which 390 billion euros will be in the form of grants and 360 billion in the form of loans, substantially below the Franco-German proposal and a key concession to the likes of the Netherlands, who objected to the very concept of grants. Although a number of issues and flare points developed, one in particular trumped them all: money. With France and Germany coming from one side and the Frugal Four from another, a definite figure had to be agreed, along with an agreement on what proportion, if any, would be dispersed in the form of grants, and what should be offered in the form of loans. In the eyes of some, there's a lot to be learned from the Eurozone crisis, when the EU placed major conditions and rules on any nations that accepted rescue measures, something which was unpopular and many argue was unsuccessful. So when the issue of conditionality of rescue packages came up once again, France and Germany continually stuck to their position that a rescue package ought to be based on solidarity, insisting that now is not the time to impose strict conditions on spending, but rather to unify and kickstart Europe's economy. However, not everyone agreed with this strategy, which led to Merkel and Macron walking out of talks on Saturday night, to the disdain of the Dutch Prime Minister. They run off in a bad mood. The fact that we continue talking shows we all have optimism. That's not to say that the Frugal Four and others pushing back against France and Germany aren't holding solidarity or unity as a key aim. Rather, the issue of moral hazard is one that remains key for all of them. Writing in the Financial Times back in June, the Frugal Four said that what we do in the EU is about solidarity, which goes hand in hand with sustainable European growth. But there is no such thing as new or fresh money. Money spent will also have to be earned and paid back by taxpayers. We are all affected by this crisis, and it puts all national budgets under severe strain. So we must have a realistic level of spending. Most importantly, money should be used carefully, and only when we know it will make a real difference. According to the BBC, the Frugal Four, led by the Dutch PM, had set a €375 billion ceiling, requiring the imposition of conditions and the right to block requests. Others, including the likes of Spain and Italy, had set a floor of €400 billion, with a compromise figure being reported to both the BBC and FT of €390 billion in grants, a figure that would clinch an agreement. Early on Monday morning, Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz tweeted that tough negotiations have just ended. We can be very happy with today's result. It continues in the afternoon. A sentiment echoed by Merkel herself, saying upon entering Brussels Europa building on Monday morning, "These are incredibly tough negotiations. They will now continue, but an extraordinary situation requires extraordinary efforts. So far, we've done justice to that, and I hope that we can also cover the remaining distance, though that won't be easy." Both Merkel and Macron, in the words of the Times, acting with unusual joint resolve, have tried to persuade the Dutch and others to soften their demands, with them seeing the Dutch PM as the principal blockade to any agreement. So much so that a French diplomat recounted that with Britain no longer a member, the Dutch have taken over the British seat as the awkward bunch. Viktor Orban, Hungarian PM, accused the Dutch Prime Minister of being the man responsible for the whole mess, and according to Reuters, Spanish and Italian diplomats have resorted to calling him Mr. No, 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 a phrase whose symbolism cannot be downplayed, and clearly echoes back to the utterance of Margaret Thatcher in the UK. At one point, European Council President had proposed large increases to the rebates for the frugal four countries, including the Netherlands, who would receive substantial increases in their rebates. The Netherlands would increase to €1.92 billion from 1.57, and Austria's would double to €565 million, with the president clearly hoping that these increased rebates might persuade the countries. In the words of the FT, following a long battle between the Netherlands and Italy, they've also instituted a governance mechanism that will allow an individual member state to raise objections if it feels that capital is failing to fulfill its reform promises in return for the money it's receiving from the Commission. This temporary break is conditional on a leaders' review to be conducted within 3 months, with the Commission ultimately retaining the final say. Former Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta, talking to French radio, emphasised the lack of justification for the imposition of conditions, irking back to the language of the European sovereign debt crisis. This is not about grasshoppers and ants. The coronavirus happens to hit the southern countries first. It's nothing to do with them not being rigorous enough over the economy. Speaking to Reuters, European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde poured cold water on the prospects of a quick agreement, stressing that the ambitious agreement is far more important than a fast one at all costs. Ideally, the leaders' agreement should be ambitious in terms of the size and composition of the package, broadly along the lines of what's been proposed by the Commission. From my perspective, it's better to agree on the ambitious facility along these lines, even if it takes a bit more time. I would hope that the leaders agree on something that's ambitious rather than fast. But money wasn't the only overriding blockade, the other being rule of law. Yet again, the role of rule of law is nothing new. Both Hungary and Poland have come under fire for alleged breaches of European values, be it when it comes to judicial independence in normal times, or the prospect of a ruling by decree given during the pandemic. A proposed mechanism to freeze money for countries violating the rule of law came under criticism from the Polish Prime Minister, who said that he would not agree to such a mechanism, given the potential for it to be used against Poland. Criticism that was supported by Budapest, with Hungary demanding that any potential sanction suspending payment would require unanimous support, not a qualified majority. Somewhat cynically, one diplomat said that Hungary and Poland's position was designed to extract more money as part of the final compromise. The sheer scale of what's at stake cannot be underestimated. In the same fashion that the Eurozone crisis was unprecedented and required immense intervention and cooperation between European member states, so too does the recovery package warrant action. According to diplomats, the Italian Prime Minister said that a failure to strike a deal would lead to the destruction of the European single market. At the end of the third day of discussions, the European Council's president declared that it was his heartfelt wish that an agreement is reached and that with one last push, the EU could declare publicly that the EU has accomplished Mission Impossible. And for once, it seems that Mission Impossible very nearly meant Mission Impossible. What do you think though? Is the fact that a recovery package is now on the cards a sign of a stronger, brighter future for Europe? Or is this just a sticking plaster and a taste of things to come? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, you can also get involved in the conversation over on Discord. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to be updated every time we release a video, and you can find more from us across all social networks simply by searching for TLDR News. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible, and if you want to see your name listed at the end of videos, then be sure to back us on Patreon. There's a link to that down below.